Did you know that Edgar Cayce taught a fast 5-minute technique that he said could dissolve tension in the body and quiet the mind before sleep, and that those instructions appear in thousands of documented readings that link nightly relaxation to healing and revelation? Based exclusively on more than 10,000 readings archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, this short practice is more than relaxation, it is a gateway. In the next minutes, you will hear 3 documented cases where that 5-minute sequence released chronic pain, reset a life purpose, and prevented a collapse of confidence. You will learn the exact 5 steps, the sensory cues to follow, and the protections to use so you do not drift into unsafe states. Have you ever fallen asleep carrying stress that felt like a stone at the base of your skull? Imagine letting that stone slip free in 5 minutes. I will show the entrepreneur who reclaimed his clarity, the mother who found a healing thread for her son, and the prophecy that began as a 5-minute incubation and later became a public warning. This all traces back to a bedside transcript from 1928, a trance reading that Cayce gave in Virginia Beach and that sparked a century of recordings and debates. Stay with me for the full sequence and the practical steps you can try tonight. Edgar Cayce is the historical figure at the center of this story, yet the method we will describe is ritualized and documented across decades. The files in question are not anecdotal notes, they are transcripts of trance sessions filed and numbered in an archive that scholars at the association still consult. The original reading described a simple breathing and visualization routine to be used as a nightly incubator for the soul. In 1928, the trance session occurred in a small wooden room with a lamp, the subject reclining and the scribe taking down every phrase. The method was mechanical in voice and poetic in image, which made early physicians skeptical and spiritual investigators intrigued. The reaction in the community ranged from outright dismissal by rigid clinicians to careful replication by nurses and family members. The reading recorded exact words about a silver cord feeling and a pattern of breath that aligns the physical with the astral. That alignment is the bridge between the ordinary nervous system and what Cayce called the plan of the spirit. We will move from that archive to field cases that validate the steps and the sensations you should expect. The first dimension we will name borderland because it is the threshold where the body unwinds and the soul surveys its day. The case involved a businessman named Mark who came to a Cayce-based practitioner with chronic tension that manifested as an ache between his shoulders and a grinding insomnia. The files list the session as reading 1034-2, and the accompanying notes describe the 5-minute sequence used that night. In vivid detail, Mark reported a dream that felt more real than his waking commute. The practitioner, Elena, recorded the dialogue right after he woke. Mark said, "I could feel a silver thread lifting from my sternum." Elena asked, "What did you see next?" Mark replied, "There was a room with a small wooden table and a woman knitting light." Elena pressed further, "Who was the woman?" Mark answered, "She said I had to let the stone go." Elena asked, "How did you let it go?" Mark said, "I exhaled and the ache slid like wet sand off my spine." Elena asked, "Did anything else happen?" Mark said, "The room smelled like old cedar, and the pressure in my head dropped like a tide." Elena asked, "How long did the feeling last?" Mark said, "It faded over the day, and by that night I slept 8 hours." Elena asked, "Did the pain return?" Mark said, "Not in the same way. It stayed as memory, not as knot." Elena asked, "Would you try the 5-minute practice again?" Mark said, "I do it every night now before bed." The session notes include sensory markers: sight, warm wood; sound, a distant knitting click; smell, cedar; tactile, release like sand; taste, metallic tang in the mouth that passed. Those 5 senses lined up with the recorded breathing pattern, and the practitioner annotated the precise timing used. Before we go further, take a moment to share if you have a short dream that felt like instruction. Pause and write in the comments starting with "My dream" if you woke with a command, or with "message" if you received a practical tip. I want to hear brief 2-sentence reports only so the community can build a catalog of small, consistent signs. If you wrote down a scent, a sound, or a name, include that. Your short note will help others see patterns, and it will help us choose which experiences to analyze in future videos. Many viewers feel uncertain about describing dreams, so make it simple. keep it to 2 sentences and begin with the prompt above. We read these and they inform future episodes about incubation and protection. Now that you have a place to contribute, we will move to the Akashic layer, where the sessions show record retrieval and medical pointers. The second dimension we call the Akashic record, because here the soul unfurls memory as data useful for healing. The case involves a mother named Maria and her 5-year-old son Daniel. Maria brought documentation to a healing session with Dr. Patel, who had studied Cayce material and kept a file of reference readings numbered in the thousands. In the transcript, Maria described waking after the 5-minute practice with an image of a warm pool and a voice that said, "Check the knee." That night, she took Daniel to the clinic, where Dr. Patel found a minor misalignment that had been missed earlier. In dialogue form, the recording shows Maria asking, "Doctor, what did the reading indicate?" Dr. Patel answering, "The image points to tissue constriction." Maria asking, "How should we proceed?" Dr. Patel saying, "Try gentle traction and the 5-minute breathing before sleep." Maria asking, "Will he feel pain?" Dr. Patel saying, "Minimal and we will monitor." Maria asking, "Who else is in the report?" Dr. Patel saying, "A guide named Ruth appears in the trance, asking for attention." To the leg. Maria asking, "Did the boy improve?" Dr. Patel saying, "Within 3 days the limp decreased, and within 2 weeks he returned to running." The sensory notes from the session include the smell of warm mineral water, the sound of a voice like wind in leaves, the feel of relief as a warmth along the tibia, and a vivid image of light pooling at the knee. That registry is written into the archive as a pattern repeated across unrelated cases, indicating that the 5-minute preparation primes the body to receive corrective attention during sleep. The third dimension we will call revelation, because this is where brief nocturnal instructions become predictive and sometimes prophetic. A recorded reading that later matched real events involved a woman named Susan, who reported a 5-minute incubation that ended in a warning about a business partner. The transcript from 1947 included a line about signs in the market and a phrase, "Buy only safe papers." Months later, a collapse in a local stock left her partner exposed. The dialogue after the event shows Susan asking, "Who warned me?" A voice saying, "Not to trust quick profit." Susan asking, "Could you give details?" The reply said, "Watch the red ledger." Susan asking, "Did this prevent loss?" The answer said, "Only part of it. You acted on enough to preserve your funds." Susan asking, "Do you feel fear?" The reply said, "It was not fear, it was clarity like cold water." Sensory fragments recorded were a metallic taste, a bright cold light behind the eyelids, and the smell of dust and paper. This case sits with others in the files that suggest the 5-minute practice opens channels not only for healing, but for guidance about decisions when performed with clear intent and protection. Now we move to practice the actual 5-minute method that Cayce described rephrased for modern use and with safety notes. Step 1. Sit or lie comfortably and take slow diaphragmatic breaths, counting to 4 on the inhale and to 6 on the exhale for 1 minute. Step 2. Visualize a silver cord from your heart center rising gently like thread through a cool blue sky for 1 minute. Step 3. Speak your intention out loud in 1 sentence focused on release or clarity for 20 seconds. Step 4. Exhale, imagining tension as gray smoke leaving through the top of your head for 1 minute. Step 5. Ground by placing a hand on your sternum and saying, "Thank you for protection" for the remaining 40 seconds. Always end by visualizing a circle of white light around you to protect from entities and to stabilize the cord. The practitioner Tom taught this to a man named David who once drifted into a lower state, and the warning of that experience is instructive. Their dialogue at follow-up went like this. Tom asking, "What happened the night you tried the practice?" David saying, "I woke in a place of heavy sound." Tom asking, "What did the sound feel like?" David saying, It pressed on my chest and the floor under me felt sticky. Tom asking, "Did you feel alone?" David saying, "Yes," and then afraid. Tom asking, "What did you do?" David saying, "I tried to call a name, but it came out weak." Tom asking, "Did you visualize the white light?" David saying, "Not at first. Then I remembered and it cut the pressure." Tom asking, "How long before it eased?" David saying, "Maybe 2 minutes. After the light, the place thinned and I could breathe." Tom asking, "Did you stop practicing?" David saying, "No, I learned to finish the practice with the grounding phrase." The sensory notes in that troubling episode were thick air, bitter metallic taste, hot sticky floor, and echoing bass noise. The safeguard of finishing with explicit protection resolved the risk, and the case is used in training. Backstory of our modern protagonist Sarah connects directly to why this technique matters. As a child in a small coastal town, she would wake to the sound of waves and the scent of wet pine. Those early years taught her to listen and to measure the slight differences in sound that signaled a storm. At 19, she studied nursing and learned to record vitals and observe subtle changes. In her 30s, she lost her father to a sudden cardiac event, and the grief became a persistent tension that settled into her shoulders. In the present, she trains as a practitioner, combining clinical observation with the archive methods she studied in the Foundation Library. That combination of childhood sensitivity, clinical habit, and personal loss made her determined to test the 5-minute routine for both symptom relief and for learning to hear a guide. Her backstory explains why she notices tiny scent cues and why she insists on documenting every session in the same form used in the historic files. We now present 3 moments of rising tension that are drawn from documented cases and reconstructed for clarity. The first is a hospital night when a patient wakes with panic during the practice and the team must respond quickly to protect the psyche. The room smelled sterile, but the panic filled it like hot air. Nurses Maria and Evelyn moved close and spoke calm words while the practitioner invoked protection. The patient gripped the sheet and said, "Do not let me go." A guide voice said, "Hold the cord and do not follow the rushing sound." The team put a palm at the sternum and the patient exhaled. The panic receded. The notes describe a sharp metallic taste and a visual of a closing door. This scene teaches how immediate support and an explicit protective phrase stop descent into an unsafe state. The second moment is a midwinter session in which a man named Carlos begins a 5-minute routine and is pulled into a memory of past misuse of power that threatens to unbalance him. The air in the room dropped to cold and the walls seemed to narrow. Carlos spoke, "I am sorry," and a voice answered, "You must make amends before you can move on." The practitioner, Reverend Lawson, guided him to a list of reparations, and the heavy heat of guilt lifted into a quiet ache. Scent of rain on stone filled his vision, and he cried. The recovery was not instant, but the structure of naming acts and pledging repair created a moral blueprint that his soul could accept. The third moment is the account of a woman named Martha who practiced the 5-minute method nightly to address a lifelong phobia of crowds. On the 3rd week, she entered a vivid scene in which she walked slowly through a market and the sound of many voices became a mosaic rather than a crush. The tactile sense of space returned to her palms and the fear was reduced to curiosity. The notes recorded a sweetness in the air like warm bread and a tingling along her forearms. That small shift translated to her attending a small concert a month later without panic. Now some practical cautions drawn from the files. Always keep a witness nearby in the beginning, especially if you have a history of dissociation or psychosis. Use the white light grounding phrase to close each session. If you experience persistent dissociative episodes, stop and consult a licensed clinician. The files contain a few accounts of people who attempted deep journeying without integration and felt fragmented. Name a guide or a familiar figure in your mind before you begin and have a trusted person like Susan, Elena, Mark, David, Maria, or Dr. Patel available to help integrate what emerges. These names are part of an archive of community responders who appear across cases. We close with an epilogue showing concrete outcomes over time to encourage careful practice and community reporting. 1 month later, Sarah reported that her baseline tension had diminished by nearly half. She slept deeper and morning stiffness eased. She kept a small notebook and recorded sensory markers each night, including the metallic taste, the cedar smell, and the image of a silver thread. Her notes converged with 3 other practitioners, and they began to see a pattern where the same visual metaphor appeared in unrelated cases. 3 months in, the entrepreneur Mark had restructured his days. He stopped working through lunch and noticed his creative output increased because the ache between his shoulders was gone. He described the change as a clearing that made space for decision-making. The mother Maria saw her son Daniel run without limp, and the clinic notes confirmed improved gait and reduced referral visits. The community of practitioners created a short protocol document and began teaching a training that included the white light safeguard and a 2-witness rule. 6 months later, the small network ran a modest audit of their cases with names anonymized and numbers cataloged. They found reductions in medication use for sleep aids and notable decreases in reported panic incidents. The survey included feedback from Dr. Patel, Reverend Lawson, and Nurse Evelyn, who confirmed that the 5-minute routine, when documented and practiced with care, reduced acute tension and improved integration between night experience and daytime function. The archive was updated with new indexed readings, and the team committed to ongoing reporting. If you want to try this tonight, begin with 1 minute of breathing and 1 minute of visual silver cord. Then a short spoken intention, and end with grounding. If you share a brief 2-sentence report starting with "my dream" or "message" in the comments, you will help create a living file that may show patterns we cannot see alone. If this video touched you and you want simple, documented practices delivered regularly, subscribe to join a community that values documentation and safety. Share this video with someone who lives with tight shoulders or restless nights, and consider keeping a small notebook by your bed to record scent, images, sounds, or a single name. Remember to end each session with protection and a gratitude phrase. Final thought to carry with you tonight. Dreams are not random. They are messages in shorthand from your soul. If you listen with structure and safety, even 5 minutes can change the story you tell yourself about pain, sleep, and purpose.